Well, hello and welcome to a gear change show here on the 22nd of let me just prop you guys down here so if you guys sit, get rid of your bottles so you guys can see me. Hello everybody and welcome back to a gear change show, and it's the first one of many that I'm going to be producing over the next couple of months. I've already released 2 videos earlier today. Well, I think one a couple hours ago, because so the 541st episode is out. I believe it's episode 51 overall, and I think we're about 160 somewhat days into the year. Pretty abysmal when you consider how bad this year's been. So this is going to be the first time I'm going to have 3 videos in a day. I'm going to try to produce maybe 2 a day, 2 a day maybe, or 1 a day, or 2 a day depending on how I'm feeling. I'm probably going to do 2 tomorrow, and then 2 Monday, and then 1 Tuesday. And if I feel like I need to do an update or some gameplay on maybe on a Wednesday or Thursday, I'll do that. But the gear change show today will be about something that a lot of people complain about and talk about in racing, and it's there to reward people and some channels or some groups or corners, it can be sort of a punishment, and for those who don't do well, they can get rewarded and stuff like that. I'm talking about success ballast, air restrictors, fuel being taken out of your gas tank, rear wings being adjusted, and gear ratios being controlled. I'm talking about balance of performance. Everybody's BOP equivalents of technology, BOP, or balance of power, or EOP, or equalization of power, or EOC, equalization of competition, or balance of competition, or whatever you want to call it. There's so many acronyms for it, and it's the most divisive word in racing. So what is BOP? So what is BOP, folks? So BOP has been around since touring car racing has been around in Britain and Japan, and air restricting and weight restrictions have been around since forever. But balance of performance didn't really come around till, I'm going to say, the late 70s, early 80s, with racing engines, especially with, the growth of Group C and some monster engines that would create over 800-900 horsepower, and the turbo era in Formula One, stuff like that. I've talked about the turbo era from Formula One, where the cars were spitting about 1,400 horsepower. I'm talking about GT racing, prototype racing, and sports car racing in general, and why it's become such a hot topic. So, what is BOP? A lot of channels have covered this, and a lot of people have A lot of people say they hate it. Some people say it ruins racing. Some people say it's not the greatest formula. Some people say it's not the most scientific. Sometimes some people say BOP is a pain in the butt because no one can really guess what a car is going to do. Is the manufacturer holding back, or stuff like that? So no one can really tell what's going to be going on. So, so what is BOP? So what is it? It's called balance of performance. Balance of performance is basically what it means. It's balancing the performance on the grid. And what it does is it gives cars that are slower a leg up, and it carves a leg up, and it gives cars that are faster kind of puts them at a disadvantage in a way. So let's say car B. So let's say car B. So let's say car A, car B. So let's say car B let's say car A is a V8 powered GT car. It's got a 6-liter V8, 650 horsepower, and then car B has about 550 horsepower. It's a 6-cylinder, twin turbocharged, and there's a discrepancy in top speed and handling and aero and fuel consumption between the two. The big V8 car seems to be faster on the straights, but it seems to consume a lot of fuel. It seems to consume a lot of fuel, and the B car with 550 horsepower can't seem to come at it in a straight line. And also because of the engine size, and because it's turbocharged, it has to have certain weight penalties to it so that it doesn't overshadow the V8 car. Unfortunately, the V8 car will be faster in a straight line. It's got better aerodynamics. So what they do, so after everybody runs their practice sessions, after they do their testing, do practice sessions, they will start to levy weight restrictions and air restrictions and fuel limits to make sure that the car doesn't go further on gas, make sure the car conserves fuel, make sure that the balance is off, so the car has to change. So what they'll do in order to make what they'll do is they'll take some horsepower away from the V8 car. They'll add 20 to maybe 50 kilograms of weight, which is like 110 pounds, and they'll take a couple liters of fuel out because they will down the air, because the air restrictor has been taken down. So they'll take away some fuel to compensate so the car doesn't get better fuel efficiency. And what they'll do is they'll give the turbo car a bigger air restrictor, less weight. They'll put the fuel tank, and maybe they'll change the rear wing or something to make it faster in a straight line. So when it comes to racing, the 550 car can be right on the back bumper of the V8 car, and the V8 car won't be going as fast. So the cars can race so they can have a proper race. So basically, it's a reward and punishment system. It's a risk versus reward system. So it's not a punishment system. It's just a balanced performance. What it's meant to really, it's a risk versus reward system. So you can reward yourself. So you can risk going faster than everybody else and getting picked back, or you can reward yourself by hanging back and getting some better performance. Although they will take into effect certain conditions, and some teams will, and because the cars have a lot of penalty weight, the cars will actually and let's just say that the changes to the V8 car aren't enough, and it's still going faster. I mean, we'll say car B gets to win maybe within a second. It was 2.5 seconds off the base. It's within a sec. It's within a second, maybe three quarters of a, maybe half of a second or something like that, give or take race pace. But it's still not close enough, and the V car still has the advantage. So what will happen is the car behind it will get more power, less weight, get more fuel so it can go longer on a tank of gas, and the V8 car will be pegged back more power. It'll gain a couple more kilograms of weight. Maybe it'll have its wings or its gears adjusted. And then the cars are fighting nose to tail so that they can have a close on-race battle. It's really meant to have close racing and stuff like that, but it's really never a clear process. And does IMSA and the World Endurance Championship or the FIA or the ACO, whoever the hell they are, ever get it right? Well, there's some weekends where they get it wrong, and then there's some weekends they get it right. And they have special rules, or they have a special rule set depending on tracks and the performance that they have. So teams will usually, I mean, you're going for a first position no matter what, but usually teams can engineer around it. Sometimes they can, sometimes they cannot. So when did BOP really start? BOP and success ballasts, I don't think BOP or restrictions for certain things really started, I'm gonna say, until maybe the 70s, because during the oil crisis, race cars had to get pegged back, or they had to have different regulations to save on fuel. I think 75, 76, a lot of cars in the 70s, like in the 1975 Le Mans, the Cosworth DFE, which was capable at that time in the 70s of over 500 and about over 500 horsepower at the time, 510 maybe, 520. They had to peg that back because not because of fuel economy, but because of reliability. It actually helped out the Cosworth teams win the race, because the one thing, I tell you, risk versus reward, the reward of having less revs and having less power, I think the car had 375, 380 horsepower. It was revving less, and it wasn't vibrating, because Cosworths did not do very well in endurances. They were able to go fast in a straight line during endurance races at like the Le Mans 24-hour Spa and Monza, but they weren't ever able to do endurance races like the 12 hours of Sebring, the 12 hours of Daytona, the 12 hours of Sebring, and the 24 hours of Daytona, because the cars would rev so high, they would literally shake the car. They would literally shake the car apart and cause failures in the drivetrain, the engine, the oil pumps, and all that other stuff. So you're talking about restrictions for fuel economy. That actually was more of a reward for that, because it helped them do so. Also, I think Le Mans lost its championship status because of those fuel saving restrictions. Everybody thinks Group C was the first era. 1974, 1975 were the first years where that happened. So, and then NASCAR sort of came up with the air restrictor, although air restrictors were kind of a thing in rally racing and in Formula One with the FIA, because the rally cars in Group B were making 500-600 horsepower, and of course the BMW and the Lotus, Renault Gardini, and the Ferrari and the Williams cars were all making about 1,000 horsepower. and then they turn the bar down. Same thing in the IMSA and the FIA. They would turn the boost down or limit displacement on certain cars because they didn't, or certain turbo configurations because they didn't want the cars, certain cars winning. So I know Porsche definitely was restricted to a single turbo, and I think it was like a 2.8 liter engine. They weren't really, and I think a lot of teams in IMSA went to 3.0s and 3.2s and 3.4s and stuff like that because they wanted to bypass the bounce of performance or the restrictions that were put on them, so that they could do that. I'm gonna say BOP really didn't become a thing. BOP is more of a touring car thing. I know in the Japanese touring car series, or the Super GT, for those of you over in Japan, my Japanese viewers may know this, you guys have success ballast, where you guys will, where your race car drivers will have weight put on your cars. As they win, they get more weight. As they lose positions and they don't finish so well because of the restrictions, you finish further back, you get less weight on you, and some teams have been able to drive around this restriction. I know that Acura's not Acura, but Honda's NSX was able, back in 2007, 2008, was able to do this. The British Touring Car Series also has success ballast. V8 Supercars also has success ballast, I know for a fact. But BOP has been more of a thing since like the early to mid 2000s. So back in 2001, there was a car that kind of rewrote the performance level and the integrity and the durability of a race car. And that car was the Audi R8 LMP1. So back in 2000, it was revealed back in 2000, and this is the car that changed its gearbox in like 3.5 minutes, when it took hours for race teams to do that at Le Mans and Daytona and stuff like that, even though the Audi R8 never raced at Daytona. It should have, it could have won, but and that was the car that kind of set it off. So I don't think it was until 2003, 2004 that they started limiting the power. The Audi R8 made around 610. It's rumored it made anywhere, when in its first era, in between 2001 and 2002, it was rumored to make over 638 horsepower, or 640 horsepower, something like that. Very fast car, capable of almost 205, 206 on the straightaways at Le Mans. And wasn't the fastest thing, but it was robust, it was reliable. And back in 2004, and 2003, 2004, they ran it down to 550 horsepower. And then in 2005, I remember watching that Le Mans, they ran it down to 520. Made it carry less fuel, like 80 liters of fuel. And really saddled it. It ended up winning. So it was one of those instances where the BOP didn't do a damn thing. And that was sort of the what kind of rolled the BOP between LMP and GT. And then the R10 the next year would do the same thing. But I'm going to say the biggest BOP battle of all time would be 2006 ALMS with LMP1 with the diesels versus the gasoline cars, and the Corvette and the Aston Martin. And I remember the LMP1 BOP not doing too much to the Audi R10s, but I remember wholeheartedly BOP killing the Aston Martin Corvette battle all that time. I remember when Corvette went to Sebring in 2006. It weighed like 2,600 pounds. Aston Martin was weighing about 24.25 or 24.50. I remember the Corvette could not handle being in the heat. And as soon as it cooled down, it got better. But I could tell that, well, listening to the radio, that this was going to be a battle. And they added more weight. They took the air restrictor down. And I remember Le Mans, they brought the air restrictors back up because they wanted everybody to fight on full. But when they got back to Lime Rock, they had the smaller air restrictor and more weight. I remember 25 more kilograms. I remember they were another 55 pounds. So they weighed about, I think they weighed about 2650 or 2660 or something like that. Something really heavy. And I remember watching them, and I remember listening to the radio broadcast, because radio broadcast on a computer at home before we went to down to the vineyard for a week down some rental cottage. And I remember watching Corvette lose by like inches. And I remember that was the first time I ever seen them defeated since Sebring 05. So I remember seeing them winning all the time and then seeing that happen. And then it seesawed between BOP, more power, better tires. And I remember that slugfest. So it made the entertainment and racing very good. But none of the people were happy about it. And safe to say, you know, it was one of those systems that was pretty much crucified, to be honest. So pretty much crucified, to be honest. So yeah, so it's a system that's loved by some, hated by others. It sort of plays a factor now that we have hybrid systems in racing again, and how that all happened. So now cars can't deploy their power past a certain mile an hour, and they can only deploy it to a certain drive wheel and all this other stuff. So BOP definitely has its reputation for being either good or being destructive to competition. like Super GT is an interesting one. So Super GT, for those of you who are not in the know of my fellow English speakers who don't watch it, I've watched a few races myself. Super GT is kind of weird. It's cars with maybe between 550 and 650 horsepower now, but cars back when I was growing up, the cars had around 480 to 500-ish horsepower, because there's two classes in Super GT, GT500, GT300, although those are just representations of just classes. They should just be called, I don't know why they call them GT500. I think it's just the horsepower ranking. I think it's just tradition. It's just the way how they do it. A lot of the cars, some cars have 600, some cars have 650, 600 something. So the way Super GT keeps the cars close is the cars all have, it's like Japanese NASCAR. They all have the same engine sizes. Well, they don't have the same spec engine. They all have the same spec. They have the same size engine. I believe it's the, I forget what the engines are. I believe they're all 4 cylinders, twin turbo. They all produce between 600 and 650 horsepower, like 450 to 480 foot-pounds of torque. Really skinny, really weird aerodynamics. The way how they control the speeds on these cars is to make sure that they're not fast in a straight line, but they're good at cornering. And the cars have, that's another thing that they use to control performance, is aerodynamics. You can only have certain aerodynamics in the GT500 class that will qualify and will help you get faster and faster and faster, while there's certain things that the Super GT guys can do to curb the cornering speeds on these cars and everything else. So what they do is they take, so the cars were going fast, very fast, very loud. During the 90s and late 2000s, the cars were starting to get really too fast for the racetrack. So what they did, Formula One style, is they put a plank under there, in order to do it, they put a plank near the diffuser and the flat bottom, and what this is this sort of disrupts the airflow. It keeps it going, but it doesn't allow it to stick to the ground, and it doesn't allow it to corner as good. Although the cars can corner really fast still, they just can't corner as fast as they used to. Apparently back before this was done in 2006, 2007, 2008, these cars were flying. And they knew the cars were going to get faster as technology grew and as they were changing motors. Back in 2008 and 2009, the cars were starting to get 5, 6, were starting to get up in power. They were starting to get 550 horsepower. So they needed to curb the amount of power that, well, not the amount of power. They don't restrict the power. They keep the power the way it is. They give it more penalty weight, and then they also change the aerodynamics. I don't think they do a fuel load, but they definitely control it with aerodynamics and a success ballast. Same thing. If you win races and you're very successful, you get loaded with a bunch of weight. I forget what the maximum is. I think it's like 80 kilograms or something like that, which to my non-English viewers, you guys will know, is around about 166 pounds. For my English speakers, that's how much 80 kilograms. For my English or my fellow Americans, that's 165, 166 pounds worth of ballast. And as you win races, you gain more, but as you finish further down, because the weight restriction does actually hurt you. So if you set up and develop your car, if you developed your car to be fast and be very good in a straight line, especially with the twin turbo engines, and you also made it good for cornering, and you developed the cars to just, you developed your car in the off season to corner, well, your but not have it corner well and focus on it, just make it going fast. That can impede your ability to fight for wins, and you'll get pegged back, and then you'll get your performance back. It's not a complete science. It's not a 100% complete science, because this does get circumvented. Some teams do actually mitigate this with an ability to you know, make more power or figure out a setup, trick setup and stuff like that, depending on what the team's tested for and stuff like that. So, and it's definitely, it definitely helps out the little guy that can't get a leg up. They can't get a leg up. They get a chance to get a leg up on the bigger teams, and they can have a fair shot. It gives the bigger teams a little bit of a learning curve, and it gives the smaller teams, the teams that really can't compete very well, a chance to get the victory. So, but yeah, that is the reason why BOP exists, and that is the reason why BOP exists. It's meant to either help you or hurt you. So that was my take on BOP. Hope you guys enjoyed the episode, and I will see you guys. I'll see you guys in the next episode tomorrow, but I will also see you guys next week for the next Gear Change show. Don't miss it. I'm definitely going to broadcast it. While we're talking about BOP and balance of performance, I think the next segment will be about I think the next section will be about aerodynamics, the history of them, how it affects race cars, and I'll talk about different eras like Formula One, GT racing, prototype racing, and how teams were able to get that unfair advantage. And I may talk about Indy as well, because Indy, you do have to cheat the air to go fast, so around the 2.5 mile oval. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. I'll see you guys next week for another Gear Change show. Tomorrow will be another episode of the radio show. I may talk about automotive news that has come to my attention and stuff that I have to cover now that I'm back. And I'm going to talk about the 2026 F1 regulations. I know everybody's talked about it, but I'm going to share my thoughts and what it will mean for the sport going ahead, what it will do, and how cool the cars look, and how iffy some of the performance is going to be. So I hope you guys enjoyed this one. I will upload this as soon as I'm done. I hope you guys enjoyed this, and as usual, everybody, long live America, God bless America, long live our freedoms and our rights, long live the spirits of those we lost along the way in the years we've been alive. Also, pray for all my fellow friends and everybody else out there. Let everybody stay strong, power through their obstacles, and find a way to win. This is Mike Camo for another Gear Change show. Good night, everybody. I'll see you guys tomorrow for another radio show. Peace out, everybody. I bid you guys all good night.